Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 2 Kings, the 13th chapter. Picking up from where we left off, in the 12th chapter, we read about the reign of Jehoash or Joash, the king of Judah, right, and his efforts to repair the temple, and pretty much do that which was right before the Lord to the best of his ability. Now, one thing to note as we go through the book of 2 Kings is that the way it's written is not always in chronological order, meaning, in the previous chapter, sometimes you may read a verse that goes maybe sometime into the future and talks about who succeeds who and succeeds who and what they did. And then you read in the following chapter and it sort of goes back to the present time, to talk about X, Y, and Z. All right. So, you can think of it as just statements that are inserted in as you're speaking. So here's an example. You may be speaking about the past. You may be in the future talking about how in 2016 Trump became president, right? And then in 2020 or so, right, or 2021, Biden became president. Now, you may say that, but you may say something like, oh, Trump became president in 2016, and then he later on went on to, be succeeded by Biden, and then later on he came back to be the president again. And then you go back and continue and say, when he was president in 2016, X, Y, and Z. So the point being that sometimes, just to give enough context on that thought, in the scriptures will follow through as to a little bit as to what happens after said individual, but then it'll come back to the point that's being originally made here. And we'll see an example of that in this chapter. So this is 2 Kings chapter 13, verse 1. In the 23rd year of Joash, the son of Ahaziah, king of Judah. Now remember, Ahaziah was the king who was slain by Jehu. And Ahaziah's mother, Athaliah, is the demon that had all of Ahaziah's heirs slain, save Joash, who was saved, right? He was delivered so that he wouldn't be slain. This is the Joash we're dealing with here, right? So it says, in his 23rd year as king of Judah, Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, began to reign over Israel in Samaria and reigned 17 years. So Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, the Jehu that killed Ahaziah, right? And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord Yahweh. And this is Jehoahaz. And followed the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which made Israel to sin. He departed not therefrom. And what was that main thing that Jeroboam did? He built those two golden calves, right, the idols, and had Israel worship them. And till this day, you still had Israelites following in that way, as an example being Jehoahaz. And the anger of the Lord Yahweh was kindled against Israel, and he delivered them into the hand of Hazael, king of Syria, and into the hand of Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, all their days. Now, this is the same Hazael that Elisha spoke to, quote unquote, anointed verbally, you might say, that he would become king of Syria, right? Now, Ben-Hadad is not an actual name per se. Not entirely sure if Hazael actually is one as well, but Ben-Hadad, you could say it's to some extent like the equivalent of like the equivalent of, let's say, Pharaoh, right? So like the equivalent of like Pharaoh. So Pharaoh who? Pharaoh Necho the first, Pharaoh yada yada. And Ben-Hadad, when you break it down into Hebrew, I believe it's a ban as in son, right? So son of Hadad. And Hadad was the actual deity of not just the Syrians, But let's look it up here. All right, let's say we do like Syrian god Hadad. Right, so just a little brief information about him here. Right, Hadad was a West Semitic, would really should be Shemitic, right, because they are descendants of Shem. So a West Shemitic storm and rain god worshipped in Syria, Palestine, and Mesopotamia. He was also known as Baal Hadad or Lord Hadad. Who was Hadad? Hadad was the chief Baal or Lord of the West Shemites in northern Syria. He was often depicted as a bearded man wearing a horned headdress and holding a club and a thunderbolt. The bull was his sacred animal. Hadad was the consort of the goddess Atargatis. And you can see a bit more about him here. It says Hadad was similar to the Assyrian Babylonian god Adad, and he is known by various other names. Let's see if that shows in here. Let's go up a bit. Where are we? Yeah, he's also called Rimmon. As you can see, Baal Zephon. I think you might see that in the scriptures at some point. So there you go. So when you hear Ben Hadad or Ben Hadad, that's pretty much what it goes back to over there. So where are we? So the Lord, the scriptures here saying that the Lord, due to this wickedness, he gave Israel into the hands of the Syrians here, right? So during the time of Hazael and his son. And Jehoahaz besought the Lord Yahweh, and the Lord Yahweh hearkened unto him. For he saw the oppression of Israel, because the king of Syria oppressed them. Now, this here, right, this parentheses here, when you see this is basically a thought, right? You could almost say like expounding upon a point by the author here. And you can also read verse 4 to verse 7, because that's the continuation of the context. The context continues from verse 4 to verse 7. Verse 5 and 6 is like an expounding upon, or giving some additional information concerning what was just mentioned here. And that's why it's in parentheses. So the example that I gave earlier, which was speaking about Trump, you may be making a point about what Trump did in 2016, right? And in the midst of that, you may mention he became president, and then you may give some side information here, like he became president, but later on, Biden, like how today they'll say who would later on, then be succeeded by Biden, but then come back again for a second term. And then you'll go back and continue your thought. So that's sort of like what's going on here in verse 5. Anyway, it says here, and the Lord Yahweh gave Israel a savior, so that they went out from under the hand of the Syrians, and the children of Israel dwelt in their tents as before time. Nevertheless, they departed not from the sins of the house of Jeroboam, who made Israel to sin, but walked therein, and there remained the grove also in Samaria. Okay. Verse 7, neither did he leave the people, or leave of the people to Jehoahaz, but 50 horsemen, and 10 chariots, and 10,000 footmen, for the king of Syria had destroyed them. See, so now it's continuing. This is saying what ultimately ends up happening. The Lord saw the oppression, and ultimately he sent a savior and delivered Israel from the hands of the Syrians. But in context of what's being said here, it would read, because the king of Syria oppressed them, neither did he leave the people to Jehoahaz, but 50 horsemen, meaning he oppressed us so bad and destroyed, the people, the resources, and so on and so forth, that it all was left but about 50 horsemen, and 10 chariots, and 10,000 footmen, and so on. For the king of Syria had destroyed them, and had made them like the dust by threshing. which is basically nothingness, right? And threshing going into the threshing floor, right? You can read about what that's going into. You know, what's a threshing floor? What is it used for? Now the rest of the acts of Jehoahaz and all that he did, and his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jehoahaz slept with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria. And Joash his son reigned in his stead. So now we have a Joash of the northern kingdom, son of Jehoahaz, and we have a Joash or Jehoash of the southern kingdom, son of Ahaziah. In the 37th year of Joash, king of Judah, began Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, to reign over Israel in Samaria, and reigned 16 years. So you notice they call him here now Jehoash, just to make a distinction, because Joash and Jehoash are interchangeable, right? But to make the distinction so it's not as confusing. So you had the Joash of the southern kingdom, right? He reigns. During his reign, you have Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu of the northern kingdom, comes into power and then reigns for a bit and then dies. And then Jehoahaz's son, also named Joash, comes into power during the reign of the Joash of the southern kingdom. And what you can do simply is you can look up kings of Israel and Judah chart, and I'm sure there should be some pretty good ones that come up. So here's kings of Israel, here's kings of Judah, and boom, they put it nicely for you. So if we go down to where we are here. You had Ahaziah, Athaliah, and Joash. So you see Joash, and they color-coded it nicely too. Joash, son of Ahaziah, was king of Judah. He overlapped a bit with Jehu, king of Israel. Then Jehoahaz, the one we just read about, reigns during the time of Joash. And then a little bit of his son, the Joash of the northern kingdom, reigns during the time of the Joash of the southern kingdom. Okay, so this is where we are at this point in time. So 3 northern kingdom kings have basically been in power while Joash of the southern kingdom was reigning. Verse 11. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord Yahweh. He departed not from all the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel sin, but he walked therein. So he continued in worshiping those idols that Jeroboam had set up, and generally continued in idolatry. So now this individual here is dealing with this guy right here, Joash of the northern kingdom. Verse 12. And the rest of the acts of Joash and all that he did, and his might, wherewith he fought against Amaziah king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And so you see mention now of Amaziah, which was the son of the Joash of the southern kingdom. See, so you can see how they interlap here. And so just a brief mention here is of like some of the things that Joash of the northern kingdom did, and how what his interaction was with the southern kingdom, the king of the southern kingdom being Amaziah at that time. So it doesn't expound on it, it just gives you a little glimpse as to some of the things that happened during Joash's reign. And Joash slept with his fathers, and Jeroboam, which in this case would be like Jeroboam II, as you can see they have him here, sat upon his throne, northern kingdom. And Joash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. And that's also another indicator. If you get confused, you're like, wait, Joash, who, which one is which? Use the context of the verse or the verses to find out, right? If it mentions him being buried in Samaria, then it has to be a king of the northern kingdom, right? For the most part, because the kings of Judah were buried in Judah or Jerusalem, and they'll say with their fathers. So they will make a distinction here. Now Elisha was fallen sick of his sickness whereof he died, meaning You know, Elisha got sick, and this was the ailment that ended up taking him out. And Joash, the king of Israel, came down unto him and wept over his face and said, O my father, the chariot of Israel and the horsemen thereof. So now you see how in verse 14, as I mentioned before, since everything is not necessarily in direct chronological order, and what I mean is sometimes some verses jump, they talk a bit more about the future for a little bit, then it comes back. So in verse 14, now we're back to talking about Joash of the northern kingdom. So going back to the chart, we're dealing with this guy right here. Okay. So he comes to visit Elisha, all right, and he weeps. You know, he's seen Elisha in that condition. I mean, Elisha at this point is probably very old. And Elisha said unto him, take the bows and arrows. And he took unto him bows and arrows. Oh, now going back to verse 14, why did he say the chariot of Israel and the horsemen thereof? Well, you can imagine, well, technically, right? What do the chariots and the horsemen represent per se? They are like the battle, let's say like almost like the military might, right, of the nation here. And Elisha, with the position he was put in, right, with his counsel, with his, you know, the prayers, with his spiritual power, he played a very key role, you know, very strong in giving Israel the advantage. Okay, whether it was knowing where to be, whether you should smite these people or not, you know, all of these things. And so, you know, saying that, right, the chariot of Israel and the horsemen thereof is likened unto saying, like, you know, with Elisha gone, we're losing, you know, a very heavy part of Israel here, you know, and when it comes to all of these things. Okay, he was basically like the standing army, you could say, right? And I say that lightly, loosely, right? Obviously, he wasn't a literal standing army, but you get the point. So Elisha tells him to take a bow and some arrows. And you can imagine Elisha's probably at this point, you know, laying on a bed, or maybe if he's able to, probably maybe sitting up, but he's probably old in a bed or something along those lines, just to put a bit of a visualization to it. And he said to the king of Israel, put thine hand upon the bow. And he put his hand upon it, and Elisha put his hands upon the king's hands. And he said, open the window eastward. And he opened it. Then Elisha said, shoot. And he shot. And he said, the arrow of the Lord Yahweh's deliverance, and the arrow of the deliverance from Syria. For thou shalt smite the Syrians in Aphek, till thou have consumed them. Because remember, at this point, the Syrians, Hazael and Ben-Hadad, had the upper hand over Israel, and they were oppressing Israel. So this shooting of the arrow was symbolizing the Israel basically gaining now the upper hand over the Syrians. And he said, take the arrows, and he took them, and he said unto the king of Israel, smite upon the ground. And he smote thrice and stayed. So the Joash, right, takes the arrow. Elisha says, smite it. And he's, you know, you can imagine that he's almost like trying to break the arrow, right? He's smashing it upon the ground, but he does it only 3 times and stops. And the man of God was wroth with him and said, why thou shouldest have smitten 5 or 6 times. Then hadst thou destroyed, or hadst thou smitten Syria till thou hadst consumed it. Whereas now thou shalt smite Syria but thrice. So he was mad, but the thing is, Elisha knew what it represented, but the king of Israel didn't. He was just following what Elisha said. So Elisha is mad because he's saying, yo, you should have like completely demolished that arrow. Because if you hit it a couple more times, right, you would have completely destroyed or taken over the Syrians. But now you're only going to get it, you know, you're only going to beat them basically like 3 times. And Elisha died, and they buried him. Now, when Elisha died, right, it's from verse 19 to verse 20. But it's not that right after he said that to the king of Syria, boom, he just dropped dead. It's saying in soon enough, right, in passage of time, Elisha dies, they bury him, and then continue from there. And the bands of the Moabites invaded the land at the coming in of the year. And when you look into the word bands here, typically it's going into some like army or a group here. And, one of the definitions here is like raiders, which you can sort of imagine would be the case, because the Moabites had basically rebelled from under Israel. And now seeing the condition Israel is in, you having wars with the Syrians, you're basically at civil war because you have the southern and northern kingdom going at it from time to time. So you had these Moabites coming up in there. So they pull up, and it came to pass, as they were burying a man, that behold, they spied a band of men. And they cast the man into the sepulchre of Elisha. So this was a separate individual they were burying. But when they peeped, right, to use modern slang, when they peeped the Moabites, they put them in there, throw them in there, right? So they wouldn't be. I mean, if you're burying somebody and you see this army of your enemies coming, you're not just gonna stand there and say, hold on, time out, we're doing something here, right? So you can imagine hastily they cast the man into the sepulcher, right, which is a burying place, the same place Elisha was buried. And when the man was let down and touched the bones of Elisha, he revived and stood up on his feet. But Hazael, so that goes to show the power. Like, you can imagine maybe some of the residue of the spirit, that was so heavy upon Elisha was just a part of that lingering in his bones, to where just by touching it, a dead man was revived. But Hazael, king of Syria, oppressed Israel all the days of Jehoahaz. And the Lord Yahweh was gracious unto them, and had compassion on them. Now when we go up, let's see. Yeah. So, like I mentioned, how, it talks a bit about this guy, and it talks a bit about that guy, and so on and so forth. Right. So we know Joash, king of the northern kingdom. Let's see where we at. So here we are. Joash, king of the northern kingdom, was son of Jehoahaz. And we just read how Joash went and spoke, cried upon Elisha and so on and so forth. But now we're hearing mention of Jehoahaz. See, so it's just given an account of, okay, and during the time of this guy, this happened. And then at this point, Elisha dies. But also during the time of this guy, this happened. And this over here, this happened. Right? Because you can imagine, if not, then the author would have to pause at every moment, right? Oh, so during the reign of this guy, he's doing this. Oh, but then at this point, Elisha, this happens to him. But then at the same time, the Moabites, they were doing this. But then also the Syrians were doing. So sometimes it's just like, okay, you give a good amount of information about person X, and then person Y, and then person Z, and so on. Verse 23, and the Lord Yahweh was gracious unto them, and had compassion on them, and had respect unto them, because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and would not destroy them, neither cast he them from his presence as yet. So the Lord, remembering his covenant, right, with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, had mercy upon Israel, seeing the oppression they were in under Hazael. So Hazael, king of Syria, died, and Ben-Hadad his son reigned in his stead. And Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, took again out of the hand of Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, the cities which he had taken out of the hand of Jehoahaz his father by war. 3 times did Joash beat him, and recovered the cities of Israel. So just as Elisha had told him he would do, that's what he did, and got the territory back from out of the hands of the Syrians. And that brings us to the end of 2 Kings, the 13th chapter. And so you can see pretty much the couple of main things here, right? Elisha is dead, and for a period of time, you had the Syrians that took over the territories of the northern kingdom, but through the mercy of the Lord, Israel was able to fight back and gain those regions back again. So Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Raka Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.